Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Rebuttal Podcast, where we break down case law, calamity, and of course, chaos in the legal field. I am once again your host, Reb Maisel, and today's episode is going to be a light and funny and interesting one all about animals on trial, right? Specifically, animals that may or may not have been put in witness protection, parrot protection, may I say properly, okay? We are not going to get into the bad news that's happening current event-wise because I'm exhausted. And I'd like to giggle for once in my fucking life, so let's go. Have you ever heard the phrase, "A dog is a man's best friend"? It may seem like a saying as old as time, but the famous Missouri Supreme Court case of Burden versus Hornsby of 1870 is considered one potential origin for that phrase. In September of 1870, the Johnson County courtroom was the setting for the most celebrated dog case in the world. When Leonidas Hornsby shot his neighbor and brother-in-law Charles Burden's best hunting dog, Old Drum, Burden first threatened to kill Hornsby, but instead sued for $100. Hornsby had been employing his nephew to guard his flock of sheep, but denied giving any instruction for his nephew to shoot Old Drum. After 2 trials, the jury found Hornsby guilty of ordering his nephew to kill Old Drum and awarded Burden $25, but that judgment later was reversed. At the 3rd trial, Burden's lawyer, George Graham Vest, delivered an emotionally wrenching closing argument titled "Eulogy for a Dog." Let's hear it. Quote, "The best friend a man has in this world may turn against him and become his enemy. His son or daughter that he has reared with loving care may prove ungrateful. Those who are nearest and dearest to us, those whom we trust with our happiness and our good name, may become traitors to their faith. The money that a man has, he may lose. It flies away from him, perhaps when he needs it most. A man's reputation may be sacrificed in a moment of ill-considered action. The people who are prone to fall on their knees to do us honor when success is with us may be the first to throw the stone of malice when failure settles its clouds upon our heads. The one absolutely unselfish friend that a man can have in this selfish world, the one that never deserts him and the one that never proves ungrateful or treacherous, is his dog. A man's dog stands by him in prosperity and in poverty, in health and in sickness. He will sleep on the cold ground where the wintry winds blow and the snow drives fiercely, if only he may be near his master's side. He will kiss the hand that has no food to offer. He will lick the wounds and sores that come in encounters with the roughness of the world. He guards the sleep of his pauper master as if he were a prince. When all other friends desert, he remains. When riches take wings and reputation falls to pieces, he is as constant in his love as the sun in its journey through the heavens. If fortune drives the master forth an outcast in the world, friendless and homeless, the faithful dog asks no higher privilege than that of accompanying him to guard against danger, to fight against his enemies, and when the last scene all comes, and death takes the master in its embrace, and his body is laid away in the cold ground, no matter if all other friends pursue their way, there by his graveside will the noble dog be found. His head between his paws, his eyes sad but open in alert watchfulness, faithful and true even to death." I'm gonna cry. Holy shit. When he finished, the jurors were in tears and they awarded Burden $50. Hornsby appealed to the Supreme Court of Missouri, but the decision was upheld. Vest's closing argument gained popularity and notoriety and led to, ultimately, a statue of our boy Old Drum being placed inside the Missouri Supreme Court to this day. Not only that, there is a statue and plaque in the Johnson County Courthouse in Warrensburg, Missouri, memorializing both Old Drum and the eulogy of the dog. The statue of Old Drum that is found inside the Supreme Court of Missouri building is visited by tourists around the world every single year. In 2017, Old Drum became the official historical dog of Missouri. I didn't know you could have one, but you could. The owner won. God bless. He won. He won his $50, which I don't think, was enough. But I mean, I have nothing to add. That is so fucking sad. Let's keep going, please, before I sob on camera, okay? Anyways, that's why there is a statue of a dog in the Missouri Supreme Courthouse, okay? You're welcome. But also, now you might be thinking, or maybe you're not, and I'm just forcing you to think this, which would be great. You might be thinking, can animals testify in court? Complete left turn we're taking here. What would happen if, for example, a parrot repeated something incriminating that you said? Can animals be put on trial? Okay. Can they be the ones who are at fault? Let's dip our toes into it, our paws, if you will. So, first of all, animal trials are totally a thing. Not so much now, but they definitely were back then. They are exactly what they sound like. People putting animals on trial, having an attorney represent the animal and another representing the party against the animal, arguing in front of a real judge who renders a real sentence onto an animal. These were recorded to have gone down in Europe from the 13th to 18th centuries, and it's funny to just think about. In 1457, a sow and her piglets were put on trial for the murder of a child. The sow was sentenced to public hanging in the town square while the piglets were acquitted. God bless. How you hang a pig seems logistically bizarre, but I guess they figured it out. There were even trials for pests like rats, locusts, and weevils. In the 16th century, there was a public defender named Bartholomew Chassanet who gained notoriety for defending rats. Listen, my best friends do that all the time on the regular, every time they date a loser. So I can't knock somebody for seeing an opportunity to flex their defense skills, to defend the undefendable. The indefensible would be the word, actually. The losers, the scrubs, the morons. Right. Free my girlies. Free them, please, from their chains. Rats ate a bunch of barley and thus ruined the harvest. This is obviously illegal. Chassanet deployed his massive lawyer brain, though, and argued that the rats could not appear in court. Why? Well, the courthouse was in town, and town had a lot of domestic cats that eat rats, which is dangerous for his clients. They could not make it to the stand for trial because they could be eaten, and everyone said, okay, you're probably right. I'm not joking. If you think that the political bullshit going on in our country right now, you know, like it's the fall of Rome again, like the fall of democracy, except who knew that the fall of the US would be so fucking stupid? There's no way that the fall of Rome wasn't at least like a little romantic or tragic. This isn't romantic or tragic. It's just so fucking moronic and dumb in clown shoes, circus behavior, right? Absolutely. That is like these types of stories in court cases that are 100% 10 toes down dead serious. Everyone was serious. Everyone involved was very much not joking around. I mean, we probably should have known, like writing was on the wall, that we were going, I mean, everything's a cycle, right? Of human intelligence, human decency, and, you know, I don't know what it is about the gene pool that we're rocking with, okay? Natural selection. We have not selected enough people to be out, I don't think. Enough brains, enough RNA, DNA, mRNA, whatever those are, okay? Enough of those have not been canceled out to combat this type of buffoonery. That's why we see it today in different forms, right? People arguing for rats on trial and actually hearing argument and wasting their time about that. Not really that different from the tariff situation today. I'm going to be so fucking for real. There was also a trial in 1474 where a male chicken was tried for laying an egg, and the prosecution argued it was a crime of sorcery and thus an existential threat to Christianity. Because remember, this is 13th century Europe, okay? The Christians were king, okay? They were king and they were taxing. They were literally a merch business. They were a cash fucking biz, okay? Off the books, baby, but you're on the books and you're going to pay us, okay? Pay us some shit. They were a conglomerate if I had ever seen one. Holy hell. The defense argued that while this may be sorcery for sure, the laying of an egg is an involuntary act on the part of the chicken and thus it had to be innocent. Okay. Listen, right? I think that gender fluidity has always been a thing. I don't think it. I know it because we have historical record of it everywhere. But I mean, here's another example. You know what I mean? Add it to the list. 1474. We were like, listen, who knows what that chicken identifies as? You know what I mean? That chicken is a chicken who can lay eggs. Who are we to judge? And they said, period. And the chicken was allowed to live. Okay? I'm obsessed. That's what we should do for everyone else who is gender fluid and trans. Just let them fucking live, because who the fuck has the time to give a fuck? Why are you caring about trans people doing what they want to do and living the way they want to live and not hurting a single soul about it at all? Like, sorry, you can't do your foundation the way they can. I don't know what to tell you, Betsy. I don't know what to say. Well, I do, and that's fuck off. Do animals, though, have a place in the courtroom when they are not otherwise on trial? Nowadays, in contemporary Western legal systems, animals are generally considered property and thus don't have the moral agency to commit crimes. For example, if your neighbor kills your pet, they might not end up facing a criminal trial, but rather you might sue them in civil court for property damage, which is what Old Drum's owner did in 1870. Some animals are given more weight when it comes to damages because of sentimental value, because think common household pets, and they are afforded different protections to livestock, as some jurisdictions in the U.S. don't allow livestock in residential spaces. But what about animals that speak a language? What about an animal like a parrot? Parrots, okay, people will argue, don't really actually think about what they're saying. They're repeating, right? They're imitating, they're mimicking. But there is argument that they are incredibly intelligent animals, which not really so much an argument, definitely a fact, okay, based on tests and studies, et cetera, and how much time the animals have or humans have spent around them. But the question would obviously be, well, what if the parrot is mimicking something very consequential to the case? Let's get into it, because not only is this, not a one-time thing that's happened, I'm going to tell you about 4 different cases, 4 different parrots, Lorenzo, Bud, Echo, and Hercule, that have all gone down in legal history as absolutely being some key witnesses at trial. Can a parrot testify on the stand? No. Okay, short answer is no, they can't. It would be hearsay, et cetera, et cetera. But what the parrot did was definitely helpful to pointing people in the right direction. Okay, amazing. Let's go. First, we have Lorenzo the parrot. Police officers in Colombia were repeatedly foiled throughout 2010 in their attempts to raid the headquarters of a notorious drug cartel. Officers were baffled by the cartel's continuous escapes before coming toe-to-talon with their best lookout. Lorenzo the parrot had been trained to yell, "Run, run, you're going to get caught," or "Run, run, the cat is going to get you" in Spanish. Lorenzo and 2 other specially trained parrots would cry out the warning whenever they saw the police. Officers were eventually able to sneak past all 3 of the parrots into the headquarters and confiscated weapons and a significant amount of marijuana. In addition to Lorenzo and his 2 feathered friends, 4 human suspects were taken into custody. It turns out Lorenzo was one of over 1,700 similarly trained parrots who were confiscated around that area. Lorenzo himself was handed over to environmental authorities, officially ending his criminal career, but not a bad strategy considering the cops did indeed have to sneak past these fucking parrots, which I think is funny. Next, we have the case of Echo, the parrot who saw too much. This is from an article written by Laurel Breitman in 2016 for dig.com. So thank you to her for this. Just buckle up, y'all. Okay. Oh my God. A woman named Susie Heck, founder and director of an animal rehabilitation center called Heck Haven, takes in roughly 1,000 animals a year. When she was called by the author of this article, Heck explained that usually she rehabs wildlife like injured raccoons or orphan baby squirrels, but every once in a while, a different sort of animal shows up. One afternoon in the mid-1990s, she recalls a wildlife rehabber friend of hers from New Orleans named Corinna King arrived with a male parrot in a cage, a beautiful severe macaw, green with red shoulders, named Echo. He was medium-sized, a little thin, and knew dozens of words. King told Heck that the bird needed to lay low for a while and that she should keep his presence at the center a secret. It was all very hush-hush, Heck says, and I didn't know how long he was going to stay with me. According to King, Echo was owned by a New Orleans crime boss, and he, unfortunately, had been at the wrong place at the wrong time, seen something he wasn't supposed to, and wouldn't stop talking about it. All this chatter, King told Heck, meant he was making himself into a potential target. But because Echo isn't a person, he couldn't enter an actual witness protection program, at least not officially, at least not yet. There are many reasons why it isn't crazy to wonder if Echo could indeed have damaged his owner's case. Throughout history, non-humans like Echo have had starring roles in humanity's legal theater. In late medieval Europe, it was a time when the distinction between humans and other animal species was particularly blurry. Many people considered other creatures rational and capable of differentiating between right and wrong. This made them culpable for their purported crimes and ability to stand trial. There were sheep and donkeys convicted of having sexual relations with men, a rooster burned at the stake for supposedly laying an egg, and rats found guilty of stealing grain. In certain cases, animals also provided important evidence for human trials. In 1647, in New Haven Colony, the aptly named Thomas Hogg was convicted of buggery when a local sow gave birth to piglets that reportedly looked like him. So this is a person. Thomas Hogg is a person, a human man. And buggery, I am assuming bestiality, okay, right? Beauty and the Beast type shit, but not beautiful and mostly just disgusting. The local sow gave birth to piglets that reportedly looked like Thomas. Insanely ironic name. I will say that was it's just so on the nose, I'll have to look it up, but I already did, and it is indeed a true case, which is gross. Hogg refused to confess. And so the governor of the colony brought him to the barnyard, where he was forced to fondle the pig while the authorities watched. This is, it's not funny, animal abuse, right? I could go on a tangent, but this was 1647. What do you want me to say? Like, that's horrific and horrifying, but also, thank God I wasn't born in that time. Say what you want about, the sign of the times nowadays being, fascism's on the rise, shit isn't great, really expensive to live. I love being in a time where I have to worry about my lip liner and not about someone molesting my fucking pig in the backyard. I will admit, okay, arrest me, right? Cuff me for that. That's fine. I have an iPhone with all of the information the world has ever known at my fingertips. And I don't have a pig that's being assaulted. The pig appeared so lustful that Hogg was then forced to fondle a second sow as a control. Oh, so they knew how to do scientific method was being employed here. They were like, we need a placebo here. We need a control variable, a control with the variable. I cannot. That pig number 2, was reportedly less aroused. Hogg continued to deny all charges and missing eyewitnesses to the deed itself. The governor couldn't make a conviction and delivered the standard punishment for sex with animals at the time, which was hanging. Hogg was whipped and jailed instead, the human Hogg. Not our sow. So, I guess that's good. But what if the pig had been able to speak, right? When we talk about parrots like Echo, we are talking about an animal that possesses a trait that few others do. They can speak our language. Many species of parrots indeed are conscious, self-aware, and use language not just to communicate with people around them, but also with one another. They can also use humor, understand complex categorization of the world around them, as well as abstract concepts and ideas like names for colors and the meaning of numbers. They are multilingual, intelligent, and probably have their own moral sensibilities, even if those sensibilities are different from ours. As for whether these capacities could make certain parrots reliable witnesses, why not? I say, Humans definitely aren't universally reliable, and we can easily be taught to parrot something someone tells us or wants us to say on the stand. Am I right? I'm right. And in fact, parrots might even be less coachable in the courtroom than people who are intimidated or trying to protect themselves or someone they love. Certain species in particular can be spot-on imitators of the sounds around them, from the mundane cell phone conversation of their owners to calling the family dog by name and then bark just like them. They can mimic the beep of a microwave or a cell phone ring so closely that it is indeed confusing. Sometimes they mimic other things people do too. Occasionally, parrots, however, have learned to mimic darker things. In South Carolina in 2010, a woman went to jail for abusing and neglecting her elderly mother. When local police entered the house, they found a parrot that repeatedly yelled, help me," and then laughed. They believed the parrot was mimicking the mother's pleas and then the daughter's laughter. The few contemporary American cases where parrots have popped up in investigations haven't resulted in convictions. In 1993, Charles Ogilnick, then a public defender in Santa Rosa, California, defended a man accused of murdering his business partner, a 36-year-old woman who was killed in her house. Max, her African gray parrot, was the sole witness to the crime. After she died, he went to stay with the owner of a local pet shop, who told the cops that Max wouldn't stop saying, in the voice of his owner, "No, Richard, no, no, no." Ogilnick's client's name wasn't Richard, so he wanted the parrot's testimony. Ogilnick went as far as contacting the parrot cognition and language expert Irene Pepperberg, who told him that birds like Max can be reliable tape recorders of things they overhear, but probably need to hear something more than once to accurately repeat it. This wasn't, however, convincing enough for the judge assigned to Ogilnick's case, and Max's outbursts weren't entered into evidence. Ogilnick's client was convicted and is currently serving a life sentence. After the trial, Max was adopted by a woman fiercely dedicated to protecting his privacy, and according to Ogilnick, stopped making him or any information about him available to the media. In the circumstance of a parrot literally parroting what someone else said in the room that they were in, okay, and not actually their words, the issues of hearsay would indeed come up. Now, lawyers and law students might say here, well, how can it be hearsay? Because in order for it to be hearsay, a statement has to be made out of court and offered for the truth of the matter asserted, and it has to be made by a declarant, okay? And a declarant is a person, a human person talking, okay, speaking, right? A parrot is not a human person. But we, in this scenario, I would think, in how these legal cases have treated, at least in America, we will get into other jurisdictions, okay, treated this type of issue, is they're treating the parrot like a tape recorder, right? The parrot, if they are indeed repeating what they have heard, mimicking them, it's the same exact thing as having a tape recorder in the room when the victim was killed or whatever, okay? It still technically constitutes hearsay because it's copying, mimicking statements made by someone else, right? Made out of court, offer for the truth of matter asserted the statement, I am not sure of any case in which what a parrot has mimicked has been entered into evidence successfully. Stephen Weiss, a lawyer and founder of NHRP, the Non-Human Rights Project, doesn't believe that personhood designations would make it possible for animals like talking parrots or signing chimpanzees to act as witnesses in court cases. He is convinced, however, that a signing ape or a talking parrot should be able to provide key evidence in a case if he or she could be interviewed somewhere less stressful and overwhelming than a courtroom. Quote, "Courtrooms are high-tension places," he says, "and animals will really pick up on that. But if a young child can testify, then a communicating chimp should be able to do so as well." Other countries have been slightly more open to putting non-human animals on the stand, particularly in France. In 2005, a judge ordered a veterinarian to show photos of 2 murder suspects to a Dalmatian who'd belonged to the female victim and gauge his reactions. Based on the dog's response, the vet testified that he likely knew the killers. 3 years later, also in France, a 59-year-old woman was found dead in her apartment, and the only confirmed witness was her dog. The police suspected suicide, but the family requested an investigation. So, during a preliminary hearing, the judge watched as the woman's dog was led to the stand by a veterinarian, and then a suspect was brought before him. The dog barked. The judge ultimately concluded that the barking was inconclusive, which was probably the correct Answer. Then, in 2014, a 9-year-old Labrador named Tango, who belonged to a murdered man in the French city of Tours, was called to the courtroom to determine whether he'd react to a suspect raising a bat menacingly in his direction. The court then brought a second dog, a 9-year-old lab named Norman, in as a control dog and asked the suspect to raise a bat against him too. The experiment, however, was deemed inconclusive, but these cases definitely are leaving the door wide open to animals being able to help solve crimes in a way that's just beyond like the drug sniffing dog situation, okay? Our innocent, untrained witness dogs and parrots, potentially. As for Echo, the parrot, he lived with Heck in New Orleans for nearly a year. Heck said he was usually a pretty happy bird, but sometimes late at night, when she was in another room, she'd hear the sound of a child loudly crying, then moaning, then a giant thwack. Then, worst of all, a kind of maniacal laughter. She'd rush into the room to see Echo swaying back and forth on his perch, now quiet. This made a certain sixth sense to Heck because King had told her the crime boss was under investigation for child abuse. I just got chills. Holy shit. It's possible, however, that Echo just liked to make those sounds, but if not, then, like Irene Pepperberg told the defense attorney Ogilnick, Echo probably heard the crying, moaning, thwacking more than once. In fact, it's pretty common for a parrot to mimic a crying baby. Sometimes parrots like Echo are collateral damage to crime witnesses, but also unwilling victims. Police and animal control officers frequently bring Heck birds in the wake of drug busts when their owners are sent to prison. Exotic pets like parrots have long been prized possessions of drug lords and dictatorial types used to intimidate enemies or flaunt their owners' wealth, from King John's lions in the Tower of London to Mexican drug lords' big snakes and tigers. Sometimes their parrots are addicted to methamphetamines and Heck has to put them through detox. The birds go through withdrawal and it is horrible, she said. They're suffering so much, it's like they're trying to kill themselves. The trail of Echo, though, has indeed run cold. A year after bringing him to Lake Charles, wildlife rehabilitator King came back around for the bird. It was time to move him on again, this time to somewhere in Texas. After trying to find Echo through a network of parrot rescuers, as well as by writing and calling every Corinna King in Texas and Louisiana and a few other states too, none of them could tell Heck anything about a parrot in hiding. Given that the average lifespan of severe macaws can be 50 years or more, it is indeed possible that Echo is still alive somewhere, sitting on a perch in a room, mimicking the sounds of a terrible crime. I hope not. I hope he has healed. Fingers fucking crossed, okay? Echo. God damn it. Poor Echo. We've gone through 2 out of our 4 famous parrots. So far, so good. Next up, we have Bud the Parrot. When the dead body of 45-year-old Martin Durham was first discovered in Michigan in 2015, his wife, Glenna Durham, who also had gunshot wounds but survived, was considered the first and only witness. Later, authorities began to suspect Glenna was responsible for her husband's death and her own injuries after she relayed several different accounts, at times claiming she remembered nothing, while other times denying she was the murderer. At this point, the couple's African gray parrot named Bud was brought into the investigation. Like most parrots, Bud is known for his loud mouth mimicking of the humans around him. But according to a video that police found, the bird consistently repeated the words, "Please don't fucking shoot." The video of Bud yelling could serve as potential proof Glenna did shoot her husband Martin with a plan to kill herself afterwards. Even Martin's mother believed in the bird as a witness, saying, quote, "That bird picks up anything and everything, and it's got the filthiest mouth around." However, the prosecutors ruled out asking the bird to take the stand, probably because they knew the judge would probably not allow it. Mrs. Durham was accused of shooting her husband 5 times before trying to kill herself based on other evidence that they had, not just the parrot, okay? She survived a bullet wound to the head. Her husband's relatives believe they argued over money and her gambling debts. God forbid a woman have hobbies. I'm just kidding. That's awful. Mr. Durham's former wife got custody of Bud and said the parrot used 2 different voices to depict the couple quarreling. Quote, "I believe with all my heart that those are the last words of Marty." She said, I recognize two different voices screaming and yelling, and it always ends with, don't fucking shoot. I'm sorry, bud. They're so smart. I just know they're fucking traumatized. Like, I know they have to be. People who have birds, bird people, I'm not a bird person. I've never owned a bird, but I believe that they're wildly intelligent. Are you fucking kidding me? That's why we have horror movies based around birds. You know what I mean? Like, ugh, that shit's scary. Y'all can fly and you're smart. Fucking take me out. I just feel so horrible. These birds need therapy. They have PTSD, baby. Last Parrot, Hercule. My favorite name. Unfortunately, my favorite name wins every single time, all right? The body of Neelam Sharma, the wife of Vijay Sharma, the chief editor of a leading newspaper in Agra, India, was found murdered in her home on February 10th, 2014. A robbery had also taken place at Neelam's house after the murder, and the murderer went so far as to kill Neelam's dog. But the police had no clues, no hints as to who the murderer could be. On the day of the incident, Neelam and her pet dog were the only ones in the house. Vijay Sharma, her husband, and his children, Rajesh and Nivedita, had gone to attend a wedding. The trio returned home late that night and discovered Neelam's body and the body of her pet dog. They immediately called the police and an investigation began, but with no leads, it quickly ran cold. At the same time, however, the family noticed that their pet parrot, Hercule, who was at home during the murders, did not eat or drink anything after the incident. He also stopped screeching. Neelam's husband also picked up on the fact that whenever his nephew visited, Hercule would start screeching. The parrot would even respond when the nephew's name, Ashutosh, was mentioned in conversation. He would screech and continue repeating his name over and over and over. Sharma alerted the police to his suspicions, who interrogated the newly found suspect. After this interrogation, the nephew, Ashutosh, confessed, telling the police he had entered the home with an accomplice in order to steal money and valuables, but had been caught in the act by his aunt. Afraid that she would recognize him, he stabbed her 19 times to death, and he also stabbed and killed her dog 9 times when he wouldn't stop barking. But unfortunately for him, he did not take the parrot Hercule into account. Hercule had kept silent during the murders. During his trial, the evidence that the parrot had screeched when he was around wasn't formally introduced into evidence. Ashutosh's confession had been enough, but unfortunately, regardless, for him, Hercule passed away just 6 months after the horrific event that he witnessed, which honestly, I believe goes to the heart and emotional aspect of these animals. I don't think that you could see something that traumatic and not potentially die of a broken heart, which is super fucking sad. My rebuttal for today's episode is that a eulogy for a dog and a eulogy for a parrot and a eulogy for a rat or a eulogy for a pig or a eulogy for your ferret or a eulogy for your hamster, fish, beta are all just as important and impactful and moving and emotional because we, I believe, are meant to be around different creatures with different souls, different types of animals that we come in contact with, whether it be the birds chirping outside of our window at 5 a.m., 6 a.m., or the stray cat in the neighborhood, or the dogs, the pets that we have in our homes that we love and take care of and that give us so much without asking for anything in return. Remember that there is enough law on the subject to grant you recompense. If anyone ever tries to fuck with your dog, just ask our boy Old Drum. I believe, fully believe, that everyone who is truly an animal lover, who really does take great care of their pet, okay? A lot of people don't. Fuck y'all. A lot of people do. They all believe that their animal, their pet, deserves to also have a statue and a eulogy delivered to a jury of 12. And I hope that never happens to you. Pull from the eulogy of the dog, which was given in 1870 and still rings true today, which just gives me chills. Stay safe. Love you guys. We will be back next week with a rambunctious episode. Buckle up. Love you.